So let's get into the presentation here. All right, so CFEE and the National Bank have partnered to offer post-secondary students across the country access to important financial literacy workshops. The program, Help Managing Your Money on Campus, is designed to help support young people like you by providing you with comprehensive financial education modules. This is so important and timely because more than ever, we live in a very complex financial world. And the majority of you have likely already experienced this world of financial costs, responsibilities, planning, spending, debt, credit cards, and so much more. And that's exactly why we've partnered with universities and colleges across the country to help equip students with the information they need to take on life's financial challenges. In the first half of 2020, the CFE asked students about their priorities and what they want to learn more about. And nearly 1,500 students answered their survey from 94 different post-secondary institutions. And this is what they found out. 53% of students said one of their top challenges was paying for school. 64% of respondents wanted to learn how to deal with financial stress. And 55% want to build a financially healthy life. And these are very relatable priorities, in my opinion. And they were all things that I wish I had the chance to learn more about in my first year. So today, we are going to talk about three major topics to begin to address these priorities. The first is we'll discuss how to pay for your education. There are many ways to accomplish this, including free money from the government, businesses, and others that can help support you in your education. Next, we'll be looking at how to manage your debt. So not all debt is bad, and we will get to that and talk about what the difference between good and bad debt is. And it's also important to make sure that you understand all of the terms of any kind of debt or borrowing that you do to finance your education. And finally, we will talk to you about using credit cards. These can be great tools to use to help finance your education and to buy necessary tools and stuff for your program. But you must understand how punitive they can be if you do not pay them on, off the balance in full every month. And we will discuss the impacts with your credit score and ways that you can work to improve your credit score as well. So coming out of today's webinar, we hope that you will take three things away. So we hope that you will have a better understanding on how various programs are available to you to help pay for your education. We hope that you will understand why it's important to pay off your credit cards in full monthly, and you will know how to improve your credit score and how to manage your debt so you can reduce some of your financial stress. So we'll head into our first topic of the night, which is how to pay for your post-secondary education. And some of you might already have some experience with this, but hopefully you'll come out with some additional tools that you can use to help limit the stress that you have paying for your education. So let's get started with how to pay for school. And here's what we're going to cover in this section. So we're going to cover what the costs are of attending post-secondary education, the different payment options that you have, and how. All right, the first one can be kind of intimidating, especially if you don't know quite what you're getting into yet, but I'm sure I don't need to tell you how expensive getting a post-secondary education can be. But just some interesting info from Maclean's magazine about the cost of post-secondary education. To determine the real price of an education in Canada, Maclean's undertook the first ever survey of 23,384 undergraduate students to find out how they spend their money and how they saved for an education. They found the average cost of a year for post-secondary education in Canada is $19,489.75, which is an immense amount of money that students are investing in their education. But for some students, the amount is significantly higher. So for example, a University of Toronto student living off campus can expect to spend $23,000, $485 each year, which is the highest amount on the Plains survey. Just to give some context for Lakehead, in my concurrent education program, first year tuition is $7,183. And if you choose to live on campus, residence fees are around $13,500. So this can be around 20 grand, which I know I did pay in my first year because I lived on campus. So it's definitely something that can stress people out. You also have to keep in mind that with house prices increasing at a rapid rate, rent is also likely to go up. So if anybody is considering living off campus, you also have to consider that fact. And according to Statistics Canada, the average Canadian university graduate finishes school with more than $26,000 in debt. And that is quite a big sum of money that you owe back to various people. And so it's important to know ways that you can manage that money and ways that you can potentially repay that money over time. So let's look at some ways that you can pay for school that can be considered some free money. So scholarships, bursaries, and awards would be considered some free money because you don't have to pay it back. You can also get government student financial aid. So for Ontario students, that's OSAP. And part of OSAP would be loans and grants. So grants would be some money that you wouldn't have to pay back if you register for that financial aid. You can have some registered education savings plans, tax-free savings accounts, some summer savings, or you can sign up for a student line of credit if you are in need of some more funding for your education. We are going to go into some more detail about each of these. So we will start off with scholarships and bursaries. So scholarships and bursaries is one of the best ways that the school, that you can pay for school because it is considered free money. And there are thousands of scholarships, bursaries, awards, and grants available to students. You just have to know where to find them. And most universities and colleges have bursaries and scholarships based on high school marks, which some of you might have received this year or in your first year of your studies, and then throughout your program. So what's the difference between a scholarship and a bursary? Typically, scholarships are based on academics and different achievements related to that. And bursaries are more suited towards students that are seeking out financial help based on their need. And we'll provide you, I think you all got a resource sheet beforehand. If anybody needs access to that, feel free to put it in the chat, but that resource sheet does have a list of helpful websites that you can go to look for different scholarships, bursaries, and awards. At Lakehead, we have something called My Awards, and this is where you can find a bunch of Lakehead University specific scholarships and bursaries. It currently is not accessible because they are revamping the website, but there are quite a few bursaries and scholarships that students can apply for on these sites. I'm going to pull up the web page here quickly, just to give you a snapshot of some of the bursaries and scholarships that you might have access to through this portal. There are some that are created for a specific program. So for example, history program, geography. There's some Thunder Bay specific ones. There's some Aurelia specific ones. So this is a great spot to start within Lakehead to find some scholarships and bursaries. It should be open in October, so keep an eye out for an announcement of when you can start accessing these. And for the majority of them, you will have a 2-month period to apply for funding through these. And just some numbers for you. Lakehead, oops, why didn't it? Lakehead offers around $11 million of funding through these scholarships, bursaries, and awards. So it's definitely something to look into as a student. And then there's also some few other sites that we'll go into now that are external from the university, where you can find some extra funding as well. So we'll start off. There's 3 that we'll look at specifically today. We'll look at Scholarships Canada, we'll look at University Study, and we'll look at student awards. So I will go back to my web page here. All right, here is Scholarships Canada. So with this one, you can search for specific topics related to scholarships if you are a part of any organizations, or if you do any work in specific fields, you can see if there's anything specific that you can apply for. So for example, we can see what happens when I search education here. So you can see, well, that one didn't really work for me. It looks like it's a bunch of different programs that you can get, but let's try teaching here. So if anybody is interested in teaching ELL or ESL, there's awards like that. If we search, there's Lakehead specific bursaries that also show up on Scholarships Canada. So you can also take a peek on here to see what you can apply for. This first one here is an entrance scholarship, so that wouldn't necessarily apply to you, but there are some other ones that you can look at. It's best to make an account because then you can have full access to all of their scholarships that they list on the site. I just am not logged in here currently, but this is a great place to start. There's tons of scholarships. If you head to featured scholarships here, you can get another kind of snapshot of some easy ones that might just require you to fill out a survey to enter, and then it's a draw for a scholarship type of thing. So tons of money on this website for you to access and apply for. We'll head to University Study now. So this website gives a great breakdown of funding available for students. This specifically is a web page for Canadian students, but there is a section for international students as well. So it gives some links to some other external sites that you can visit if you're interested. And they can also give you some information about different provinces and the student loans that you can access through them. So they have a website, or they have a link, and it'll direct you right to OSAP there as an example. And finally, we will look at studentawards.com. So this, kind of like Scholarship Canada, there are a bunch of scholarships and awards that you can apply for on here. So you can just take a browse, or you can search by program, by school, by value, popularity, difficulty, and stuff like that. You can also do province specific ones. So if we went to Ontario, these would be ones that are just open to Ontario students. And some of these are, once again, pretty easy to apply for. It might be a survey that you take, or it might be something that you write a short essay for and show that you were part of a certain community or did work in a certain volunteer position in a certain field and stuff like that. And there's also articles and stuff like that related to students on topics that might be affecting you. So it's also a great resource to find some information too if you're looking for it. All right. All right, next topic on how you can get funding is government student financial aid. So I'm sure all of you are aware of OSAP, as your application usually has to be in 6 months before your program starts. So you should have already applied for it for this year. If you didn't get a chance, keep this in mind for next year. And usually you apply come May or June is the best time to apply. That's usually when I do. For government student loans, you have lower interest rates than other student debt, like if you were to apply for a student line of credit through a bank. And you don't need to pay back the loan or interest while you are studying. Once you've completed your studies, though, you do have to pay it back, but you're given a 6-month grace period, so you don't have to start paying back these loans immediately. We'll head to the next one. Melanie is a great resource if you have questions about OSAP and how your Lakehead degree and how your information from Lakehead is kind of sent to the government to assess your funding as well. So feel free to reach out to her or to Student Central in general. You can apply as a part-time or a full-time student, and grants and loans depend on obviously the province that you're applying for. For me, it was OSAP, so the Ontario. Government student financial aid, it depends on your family income because you are still considered a dependent under your parents for 4 to 6 years after you graduate high school. Any dependents that you might have, so if you are a student who's also a parent, it would consider your children or anybody living with you in that respect. It'll consider your tuition and your living fees and any disabilities that you may have, and those could affect your funding, and the government takes all of these into consideration when they calculate your funding. Another way that you can pay for your education is an RESP, or a registered education savings plan. Usually these are long-term savings plans started by the guardian of a child. So your parents would have had to start one of these for you years ago. And you must be a Canadian citizen and have a social insurance number to open an account. For these, the federal government will provide a Canadian education savings grant of up to $500 or 20% of the first $2,500 that is contributed to these. Unused grants can be carried forward for years dating back to 1998 if that's when the child was born, and at a rate of 1 per year, so up to a total of $1,000 in grants per year. With these, students can get up to $7,200 in free money, depending on your family income, and lower income families can receive even more from the student learning bond. So maybe not now if your parents haven't started this for you, but it is something to consider for the future potentially. We'll move on and talk about TFSAs, or tax-free savings account. So this is another way to save and pay for school. So this is a government registered account that has no tax or interest, income and withdrawals in the account. So you can only contribute a limit set by the government. For 2021, it's $6,000, but each year's limit is cumulative. So Canadian citizens who have been 18 since the program has launched could actually contribute up to $75,500 if they had that, and they would like to put it into a tax-free savings account. But this allows you to invest in a variety of different ways for not only your education, but in potentially other ways too, if you would like to. There's obviously also summer savings. So if you work during the summer, you can open up a basic savings account for short-term saving, and it gives you access to money at any time. It doesn't have any limits on how much you can input and save in that account. And with this, you can set some personal goals of the amount of money that you want to be saved in a specified time frame. So for most university students, as an example, they are out of their studies from May to the end of August. So within that 4 months, you can set goals on how much money you would like to put away from your summer job into a basic savings account, so that you can have that money able and available to contribute to your education in the fall. All right, now we're going to talk about student line of credit. So a student line of credit is an additional way to pay for school. During school, you don't need to repay if you're a full-time student. You do need to repay interest each month on these, though, so it is something to keep in mind. You will still be paying a small fee for one of these to be opened. After your studies, you will have to repay once you get a full-time job, or 1 year after you complete your degree. And you also have to remember with student line of credits that your interest is still accumulating if you delay paying this back. And this time you have to pay back. The line of credit is based on how much you owe. So you have to make sure that you understand how an agreement works for one of these. So do your research before you actually sign on one of these. You may be given a lump sum, but then you might not be able to use a line of credit if the bank allows it. All right. Now, the most important part of paying for your education is to have a plan on how you're going to do so. So you have to figure out all of your costs and expenses for school. This will be a big budgeting task for you to make sure that you have less stress while you're actually studying, and you have to worry less about how much you're going to pay for your school. But you have to know what is variable, so what will change over time, or depending on different factors, and what amounts of money are fixed. And then you also have to know any places that you can save money by getting maybe another roommate if you're living off campus, maybe getting maybe sharing a car with somebody, or holding off on making another big expense on something that you were hoping to buy, things like that. You also have to consider what sources or income that you have. So this is when you would consider whether you would need to get a part-time job while you're in school and doing your studies. And then you also have to consider if you're going to look into scholarships and bursaries and see if you can get some money from the school or from some other organizations, or some draws and stuff on sites like Scholarship Canada. And ultimately, you have to know what the bottom line is. And if you fall short and don't have enough money to pay for something, you have to figure out how you're going to come up with that money so that you can continue to balance your budget. All right. Now we are going to have a Zoom poll. Melanie, if you want to launch that for me, we'll give you a few seconds to choose one of those options. So the question is, how will you save money to pay your tuition? And you can select a bunch of different options there. All right, I'll give it another second. Perfect. So it looks like the majority of you are going to use OSAP, which I definitely relate to. I've applied for OSAP every year that I've been a post-secondary student. And it is one of the biggest ways that I'm sure a lot of students get funding for school, because there are loans and grants available to students through this. So thank you. All right, so that's the end of our first topic. So the key takeaways from this first part of our webinar are that one, you understand that post-secondary school is expensive, but it is valuable. Two, there are many ways to pay for school, whether that's through scholarships and bursaries, government funding, your own savings, or getting student line of credits or some other loans in that respect. And three, make a plan so you know how you're going to pay for school and what you need to look out to, what you need to apply for, and all of that, so that you are set for when those payment deadlines come up. All right, the second topic that we will be discussing today is how to manage your debt. So most students will have to borrow money to pay for school. If all of you are applying for OSAP, then you might be taking the loans that the government is providing you with, and that would be borrowing money and having some debt related there. So here's what we'll cover in this section. The first is, what does the word debt mean to you? The second is talking about the types of debt, and there are many types of debt, and debt can actually even help you succeed and get ahead. And three, as students, banks and other financial institutions likely will give you special offers or terms on various forms of debt, so it's important to know those as well. All right, what do you think of when you hear the word debt? Most of it's probably bad, but feel free to share anything in the chat if you would like. The words on the screen, if you know what they mean, feel free to type that in the chat as well. But they are liability, payment, interest, loan, mortgage, which maybe some of us haven't had to do yet because of the housing market. Good debt, bad debt, debt spiral, and credit. So there's many types of debt, and this can include your student loans. Credit cards can be considered debt if you do not pay them. Overdraft protection in a debit account, some personal loans, mortgages for homes, and home equity. And for me as a student, the ones most relevant are obviously student loans. Those would be your OSAP loans. And credit cards, because I got my first credit card when I started my first year of university. And so it was definitely important for me to understand that kind of debt. We are going to watch a short video here just to explain debt in more depth here. So I'm going to mute myself and then I will play the video.
Welcome to the Wonga Money Academy. In this episode, we look at debt, one of the 4 pillars of financial literacy. Fortunately, it isn't difficult to understand. Debt is simply money you've borrowed and have to pay back later, and most people will have debt at some point in their lives. Think carefully before putting yourself in this position, as the amount of money you pay back is always more than what you borrowed. This is because credit providers offer a service that comes with a fee. They work out the fee by adding a percentage of what you borrow to your monthly installments, and it's called interest. There's also a difference between taking on good debt compared to bad debt. Borrowing money to pay for things you don't need counts as bad debt. Expensive clothes, the latest electronics, or pricey holidays, once they're worn out, burnt out, or over, you'll have nothing to show for them. Take buying a brand new car, for example. It will definitely lose its value and perhaps put you in a tough spot as well. What if you lost your job and couldn't keep up with the repayments? You might end up with a loan that's greater than the amount you could sell the car for. That would leave you with no car, plus an outstanding debt to pay. Credit card debt is always bad because the interest rates are a lot higher, usually in the double digits. In many cases, if you can only make the minimum payments, it will take you years to pay it off. Good debt applies to things like taking on a student loan for an education. In the long run, it will help you earn a higher salary, so essentially, you'll be accepting debt to get ahead in life. Taking out a home loan can also be a good debt situation. Once it's paid off, your home will be a big financial asset. The interest rates are also low compared to other credit providers. That's all on debt for now, but we'll be coming back to it later on in the series.
So like the video stated, borrowing money can be a good financial strategy if it helps you acquire something like your education. And that could add to your net worth in the future. But it can also help you acquire things like a car that you can't easily save up for in a timely manner. But you have to consider whether or not the expense will be good debt or bad debt and whether it's a good investment. So it's always something to keep in mind when you are choosing to spend a lot of money and go into debt for something. All right, so let's go through some questions that you should ask before borrowing money. The first one is, how much are you able to repay each month? You have to make sure that you can afford the loan and its monthly payment before you sign on for it. And it's important that you do not make financial commitments that you cannot afford. So please do your research before you sign any loan agreements, and truly consider whether or not it is something that you can financially manage for however long it will take you to repay any loan or anything that you borrow. The second question is, what is the total amount that you will need to repay? So it's important to calculate the accumulating interest on top of the loan amount. And you also have to consider your payment schedule and when you will need to have that completely paid off. Interest rates can vary depending on the type of loan. So for example, if you take out a $10,000 loan, the first year of interest may be 5%. Compounded annually, and that would be around $500 that you would pay in 1 year of having that loan. And that would be a total payment of, just doing some math here, $10,500. And if no payments are made the following year, it becomes 5% interest on that amount of money. So if you do not pay the $500 in interest in that first year, then it's now 5% interest on $10,500. So you're increasing the amount of money that you have to repay. And so that, just doing some more math here, you would be paying a total of $1,025 in interest for a total of $11,100 or $11,025. So it is important to consider if you can afford the interest payments on that loan so that you are not increasing the amount of debt and increasing the amount of money that you have to pay back. All right, next question. What is it, a secured loan, and what does that mean? So a secured loan is if you do not repay the loan, the creditor has legal claim of all of your assets. So this could be a house or a car. And this is based on the terms of your contract. So it is also, once again, really important to understand what you're signing when you're signing on for a different loan. And your interest rate on a secure loan is usually lower. And this is because of, as the financial institution, they can take something of value from you, but you have to be aware that if you do not pay back that loan, they have the means to take your assets from you. And so you don't want to sign on for that if you can't pay the interest on those loans, because you don't want them to take your car or your house away, because that can put you in quite a predicament. Another question to consider is, how long will it take me to repay the loan? So you always have to reference the term of the loan in the contract. And a good rule of thumb is the longer the term, the more interest you will have to pay. So the more money you'll have to pay to access that loan. The PMT or payment function in Excel can actually help you understand how the term can work. So it's definitely a tool to look into and learn how to use. Next question is, what happens if I miss a payment? Will the interest change? And this will depend entirely on the type of loan that you have. So an interest rate may increase if you fail to pay by the due date. This will be outlined in your contract for the loan. So once again, just making sure that this is a point that gets across. Read through your entire loan contract and understand every aspect of it so you know exactly what you're getting into. Once you sign, you are obligated to follow the contract, and the lender has a team of lawyers who drafted that contract, so they are very aware of what you are signing on for. So it's just as important for you to understand what you're signing on for. And one of the last questions about loans that you should be aware of is, does your loan have insurance? Loan insurance may be an option, and this depends on your creditor or where you're borrowing from. By paying into loan insurance, it's possible for the creditor to pay your monthly payment for you if you are unable to work or have become ill. And this form of insurance is typically more expensive than standalone term life insurance or disability insurance. So it's always important to do your research and to shop around for the lowest cost if you want to pursue this angle and have this insurance on your loan. You may get a lower interest rate on the loan if you buy insurance, though, because it does protect the lender in case you die or can't work and you're unable to pay your interest or pay back the loan. You just have to make sure that you weigh all of the costs of signing on for a loan and whether or not you think insurance will be something that will be beneficial for you. All right, so now we're going to give you some tips on how you can pay off your loan and maybe make it easier. So debt can feel like an overwhelming presence in your life. And hopefully by using these tips, paying off your loan may not be so intimidating. Our first tip is to consider creating a payment schedule for yourself. This will also make it easier to visualize how long it will take you to fully repay your loan and make adjustments accordingly for monthly spending so that you have the amount that you will need to pay for interest and to pay back your loan. Once again, consider using Excel or Google Sheets to set up the payment schedule because this will allow you to use some of the financial functions and also to see what happens to how much you will owe if you pay more or less each month or if the interest rate changes. Our next tip is to pay more than the minimum amount each month if possible. It's best to try and avoid paying just the minimum amount for a loan or a credit card each month because this will compound the amount of interest building on the initial principal. So if you are paying 20% interest on a credit card, this will increase the cost of whatever you purchase. It'll increase the amount of money that you're actually paying for something. And if you're paid bi-weekly for your job, you may decide to make payments every 2 weeks because this can reduce some of the pressure of your paycheck at the end of the month, and also versus monthly is a way to pay an extra month, which means you can pay off the loan more quickly. So it's a good idea to consider to take a chunk out of each paycheck and put it towards paying off your loans. And we have another Zoom poll for you. Melanie, if you would like to launch that. The question is, what is one thing you took away about how to manage your debt? And once again, you can take a second to answer that All right, it looks like you all learned about good debt and bad debt. Before I was prepping for this presentation, actually, I also only considered debt to be bad, but once you kind of reflect on the stuff that you're spending the money on, it is an investment to pay for your education, and it will get you somewhere in the long run, so it's definitely something to consider. Now, there's also some special offers for students from banks while you're in school. So this could include the ability to open bank accounts and debit and credit cards without monthly fees. And it's recommended to find a credit card that fits your needs. And it's important to shop around for different types of credit cards before selecting one. So it's always good to do your research. Look and see what offers are available to you. Different banks have different offers, and one might fit your needs better. So be sure to look at those and find something that fits you and your needs best. And that is the end of our second topic. So these are the key takeaways from this section. The first is that there are many different forms and features of the word debt. Once again, read the contract to anything before you borrow that money. The second is that debt can be good, and that there are good forms of debt like school, buying a house, buying a car to get to work, and for other forms of transportation. And the third takeaway is there are some benefits to being a student because you can get some lower fees on bank accounts, credit cards, loans. So it's always good to look into that as a student as well. Okay, we're heading into our last topic of the night, and we'll be discussing how to use credit cards. So if you already have a credit card or know a little bit about credit cards, you might be able to contribute in the chat once we get to a quiz portion of the presentation. But this is great for anybody who does not yet have a credit card or doesn't quite understand how to use their credit card, is scared to use their credit card because they don't want to accumulate bad debt and whatnot. So here's what we'll cover in this section. The first is what are all of the components of a credit card. The second is we'll talk about the various terminology related to credit cards and how the interest change works on a credit card, which is very important. And lastly, we will talk about the impacts that having credit and debt can have on your credit score and how to improve your credit score and how to get a free credit report annually. So if you know what each arrow is pointing to and what each number means, feel free to put it in the chat. A little quiz for all of you. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. I'm the same way, Melanie. I also know number 2 off by heart. Anybody know of any of the numbers? We will go over them. So if not, no worries. But all right, I will go to the next slide. So number 1 was pointing to usually where your bank logo or information about your bank is on your credit card. Number 2 was your card number. This is what you use for any online purchases that you plan to make with a credit card. The 3rd is the part of your credit card where your name usually is. The 4th is the smart chip, so the chip that you use when you plug it into a machine at a checkout. The 5th is the expiration date, so this is when it's good until, and then you will need to get a new credit card. And number 6 is the payment network. So this would be Visa, MasterCard, and so forth. Okay, we'll go through some terminology here. And I'll give a brief little intro to each of them. So there's 8 things to know about what credit cards include. The first is an annual fee. So if your credit card charges an annual fee, ask the lender if they'll waive it. They might. It's always good to ask. And they may be willing to do this to keep your business. Or they might offer you a student credit card that does not have any fees. The second is balance due. So this is the amount of money that you spend with your credit card. That will be the amount of money that you owe back onto your credit card. And this will be reflected in your credit card statement. I'm sorry if you heard that. I have 2 puppies in my house. They were quiet the majority of this presentation, but it's bound to happen. The 3rd is credit limit. So this is the amount that you can borrow using your card. And that one's pretty straightforward. The next is finance charges. So this is if you don't pay your bill on time. These charges can include late fees and interest. The 5th is grace period. So this is the amount of time that you have to pay off your balance that you owe each month before you have to pay interest. And this will be reflected on your credit card statement as well. The next is annual percentage rate, or APR. And this includes all loan service costs and interest. So just another thing to be aware of. The 7th is the introductory rate, and this is a special offer that gives you a temporary lower APR. And in most cases, this lasts about 6 months. And finally, minimum monthly payment. So most cards ask only for a minimum payment each month. This is often around 5% of what you've spent on your card, or $10, whichever is more. And your monthly statement will tell you this minimum monthly payment. All right. It can take several years to pay off your credit card, depending on how high your limit is. So it's very important to be aware of what you're putting on your credit card, and be aware that you will need to pay it back, or you will pay above what you've spent. So as an example, if you have $4,000 on your credit card and the interest rate is 20%, your minimum monthly payment might be $80, or that would be about 5%. By making the minimum payments on your debt, it will take you around 8 years to pay off your credit card, and that will accumulate to be around $7,700, and that's almost double what you put onto your credit card. And so that's not a very nice thing to have to pay. So it's very important to try and pay as much off of your credit card as you can, even if you can just pay double what the minimum monthly payment. So in this case, if you paid $160, it would decrease the amount of time that it would take you to pay off, and it might decrease the amount of money in interest that you would accumulate. All right, I have another video for you just to talk a little bit more about credit.
If you have a large amount of credit card debt and are only making the minimum payment every month, you're not going to pay it off anytime soon. In fact, if you only make minimum payments, it could be decades before you find yourself debt-free again. Say, for example, you have $10,000 in credit card debt, which is represented by the water level in this glass. In order to pay off that $10,000, you'll need to empty that entire glass by returning the money you owe to your credit card company. So every month you pour out a little water by making your minimum payment, which is on average around $142. That payment lowers the total amount you owe to $9,858. That's a little bit lower, but not much. Unfortunately, there are outside influences that can raise that amount, mainly being interest. Interest normally charges you around 17% of your outstanding balance at the end of every month. After 17% interest on your outstanding balance is charged, that brings your new debt amount to $9,999. So after 1 month, you've paid your credit card company $142, but your total debt has only gone down by 1. The next month, if you still only make the same minimum payment of $142, your debt will be down to $9,857. But again, there's that pesky interest sneaking up on you. So after paying 17% interest again, your debt is back up to $9,998. That means after paying your credit card company $284, your total debt has only gone down by $2.
So that's just a little visual for anybody who is having kind of a hard time visualizing what paying just the minimum monthly payment on your credit card would mean. But the big thing that we are trying to get across here is to pay off as much as you can for your credit card, because in the long run, it will be better for you as you will not be paying as much interest. Right.
After a year of making that...
Okay, so now we're going to get into talking about credit scores. So when you use things like credit cards, you will be building your credit score. So it is something to consider, and it can have some benefits because to have some, it's important to have some borrowing to ensure that you have the ability to borrow money for some larger purchases in the future. And this could include a house or a car, because your credit rating can establish that you are able to pay off and keep your commitments to your contracts for your loans. One gimmick to build a good credit score is to get a credit card and use that credit card to pay for 1 or 2 things a month. And these will be things that you will always pay back in full. So for example, if you want to put your cell phone bill on there and you are able to pay that off each month, that is building up your credit score. And after having paid off your credit card in full for around 12 to 18 months, you will see a meaningful improvement in your credit score. And your credit score is used by lenders to determine what kind of borrower you are. So it does kind of reflect and affect your eligibility for certain loans or credit cards in the future. A credit score is a numerical summary of the information contained in your credit report at a particular point in time. If you have any credit accounts, such as credit cards, mortgage, any loans that you have, you will have a credit report, so you can take a look at those. In Canada, your credit score ranges from around 300 to 900, 900 being a perfect score. If you have a score between 780 and 900, that's excellent. If your score is between 700 and 780, that's considered a strong score, and you shouldn't have too much trouble getting approved for a great rate on a loan or mortgage. You may have a credit score of 750 to lease a car if you want, but a prospective landlord may be fine with the 650. It's up to you or the lender, or it's up to the lender to decide whether or not they want to make a commitment with you based on your credit score. When you start hitting 625 and below, your score is getting low, and you'll start finding it more and more difficult to qualify for loans. And you will likely have to pay a higher interest rate. So it's always a good idea to keep in mind your credit score and how your debt, borrowing, and spending can affect it. So the two most important things about your credit score are your payment history. So this asks the question of whether you pay all of your bills on time. So that includes cell phone, Netflix, if you're paying utilities, pretty much any monthly payment that you make. And then the second is credit utilization. So this is the amount of debt outstanding to total credit available. So as a rule of thumb, try not to have more than 30% of credit limit outstanding at any one time. So try not to take more than around 1/3 of your limit on a loan. So just some numbers as an example. If you have a $1,000 limit on a credit card, then try not to spend more than $300 at a time on that credit card. For the 10% piece of a pie for new credit inquiries, differentiate. There's two things that you need to consider. You need to consider hard and soft credit checks. So a hard check is when you authorize a lender to check your credit and find out what your credit score is. This would be if you're applying for a mortgage, as an example. And then a soft check is when you get your free annual report and a company inquires to see if you qualify for credit, or if an employer does a background check on you, for an example. Correcting past issues will take time. So if you've done some spending and borrowing that have affected your credit score, you need to kind of take that with you and look to extend your credit to see just how you can build up your credit score and get back on track. You can access your credit score on most banking apps for free. So you just have to look into your financial institution to see what it's at. All right, some tips for improving your credit score. One is to pay all of your bills on time. We've kind of expressed this already, but your payment history is one of the single most important factors to improving your credit score. The second is to keep balances low. So your credit utilization ratio is the amount of available credit that you are using at a given time. So just to reiterate, try to only use around 1/3 or 30% of your credit limit. The third, have a longer credit history. So the length of time that you've had credit products can also affect your credit score. Generally, a longer credit history can improve your credit score as well. So if you get a credit card, for example, the longer that you have that single credit card without having to not have the ability to pay it off, can help your chances of improving your credit score. And also avoid unnecessary credit applications. So if you don't need more than one credit card, don't apply for more than one credit card. Because your credit score can decrease slightly each time that you apply for new credit. And always have a mix of credit types. So your credit score may improve if you have different types of credit products, such as a credit card, a mortgage, a line of credit. However, you should only apply for these credits when you have a need for them. All right, now we'll talk about credit reports. So your credit score is based on what is in your credit report. Your credit report is a record of how you manage your credit obligations. So it contains information on loans for the past 6 years, your payment regularity, how much you owe per account, what your limits are per account, and a list of authorized lenders who have accessed your file. And there are 2 credit reporting agencies in Canada. And you can get free copies of your credit report form from them. And they are called TransUnion and Equifax. It is your responsibility to correct any errors on your credit report. So we encourage you to request a free report from one of these agencies every year. And if you have good credit, it will give you more leverage in negotiating with creditors when you apply for new loans or you're paying loans back. Okay, so the three key takeaways from this section of our presentation is one, understand how your credit card works, especially interest charges and the pitfalls of only paying your monthly balance. The second is what are the key factors for your credit score? And these are payment history and credit utilization. And three, you can get a free annual credit report from Equifax or TransUnion. So take the steps to improve your credit score and get a free credit report. All right, we're nearing the end. So let's review everything that we have talked about today. The first was how we can pay for school. So once again, there are lots of costs to school and it can be expensive, but it is a great investment that pays off for your future self. The second part of paying for school is that there are many ways to do it. So make sure that you look into as many of them as possible. Just as a little review, there's government student financial aid, there's scholarships and bursaries through Lakehead and through the websites that I showed earlier. And you should have access to those on your resource sheet. And third, understand your costs and inflows and see if you can make any adjustments to be able to afford school. So make sure that you have a plan on how you're going to do so. The second portion of our evening was talking about managing your debt. So just as a little review here, there are many different forms of debt. You just have to read the contract before borrowing money. 2, debt can be good and there are good forms of debt. In the case of getting an education, buying a house, or buying a car. And the third takeaway from this section was there are some benefits to being a student. So keep an eye out for those, whether it's lower interest rates at banks or student discounts and things like that. And the last section was about using credit cards. So one of the key takeaways from this was understand how your credit card works. Once again, know what your interest charges are and how it will affect your payments. 2, what are the key factors that affect your credit score? Once again, they are payment history and credit utilization. And third, there are ways that you can improve your credit score. And one of them is by getting a free credit report from TransUnion or Equifax. And just some next steps for all of you today. You can head out tonight and look at different scholarships and bursaries on some of those websites that I showed you. You can keep an eye out on when Lakehead My Awards opens in October and apply for some scholarships and bursaries on there. You can make a plan to pay off your credit card. Maybe you can make a plan to get your credit card and make a plan on how you will increase your credit score that way. And request a free credit report after tonight. Head to TransUnion or Equifax, and you can get a free credit report every year. So it's always something to consider so that you know what your status is with your credit score and credit and all of that. And check out some more programs and resources. There are some more webinars and workshops like this one that will be happening throughout the month of October and November. So you can also keep an eye out for those. Just to revisit the very first objectives that we had today. The first was to learn how you can pay for your education. The second is understand why it's important to pay off your credit cards in full monthly. And the third, how you can improve your credit score and how you can manage your debt so that you can reduce some of the financial stress that you might be feeling.